It may feel like just yesterday that we looked at Temporal Forces and its top 10 cards, but pre-release events for Twilight Masquerade begin this Saturday, and it's now time to look at the top 10 cards from Twilight Masquerade, the new set hitting shelves in just a couple of weeks' time. There is quite a bit of cool stuff in Twilight Masquerade. I am not quite as hype on this set as other sets, but there's still absolutely some great playable cards in this set. And our number one card is probably going to surprise very few people, especially once you've seen the rest of the top 10. But that said, as always, we start out with the art highlights. We have art to go through, and there's some really great art in this set. First, we're going to see the illustration rare of Wattrel and the illustration rare of Cramorant. Two of my favorite Pokemon, Cramorant from last generation, Wattrel from this generation. Amazing arts from both these artists. Very much looking forward to pulling both these cards from the set. Super excited, especially to pull that Wattrel, because I think it's so cool. But Cramorant, of course, still an amazing Pokemon itself. And then also we have the special illustration rare version of Carmine. Just the lighting and the color of this card really pops in such a dazzling way. And similarly, the illustration rare Greninja also just has beautiful color and really pops. I love both these cards for basically the same reason. They're just really beautiful, very vibrant cards, and I'm looking forward to pulling both of them. In addition to that, there is a cool card pair here in the set. There's the illustration rare version of Perrin and Hisuian Growlithe. These cards are both done by Ghidorah, same artist here. And then if you are not already familiar, you'll be kind of pleased to see that they actually pair together to be part of the same art. This is Perrin taking a picture of her own Growlithe, which is just really cool. But that is the regular art. Of course, we have a card from Shinji Kanda, so we're going to highlight that. Shinji Kanda is my currently favorite artist in the TCG. So, of course, Tokia is always going to have a place in my heart. Tokia did an amazing job for the whole time they were working with the trading card game and developing art for that game. They have since stepped away, but Shinji Kanda is continuing to produce really cool artwork, including this giraffe rig that is coming out here in Twilight Masquerade. So really cool art here. I just love the detail that Kanda uses. It's almost like a pen style, very small lines, very intricate details. They've done stuff like the Giratina from the alt art Giratina rather from Lost Origin. Just done really cool art. This is no exception. So lots of really cool art. That's been a constant theme, I think, pretty much since Brilliant Stars in the TCG. There's just always an abundance of amazing art in the set. All right, so let's go to the actual top 10, starting, of course, with the honorable mentions. These are ones that did not quite make the top 10. Some of these barely made the honorable mentions. With most sets, we have kind of an overflow of stuff that's just really good or really interesting. And Twilight Masquerade was a little thinner than usual on that. I don't think it's a bad set necessarily. It's just it's not as crammed full of really good stuff as some of the other sets have been recently. So in dead last, if you will, if our first honorable mention is Greninja EX. It has the attack Shinobi Blade, which does 170 damage. You may search your deck for a card and put it into your hand, then shuffle your deck. So you're doing a decent amount of damage, and you're basically getting a computer search every turn. It's a great effect, and for a single water energy, that's actually pretty great. I've seen some Japanese players pair this up with Frostlass, which didn't quite make this list at all, where it puts a damage counter on each Pokemon with an ability every single turn. That's pretty good too. Kind of pair them together, and not quite a bit out that way. Greninja EX really hasn't seen a ton of success though, which is a little surprising. It might just be, just not its time at the moment, but it's okay, right? I said on Twitter, I believe, that it had big Garchomp EX energy, and I kind of stand by that. The card is good in a vacuum, but it hasn't been performing especially well outside of that vacuum. So, and then the second attack, of course, is Mirage Barrage. That's such a fun way to put that. Discard 2 energy from this Pokemon. This attack does 120 damage to 2 of your opponent's Pokemon. So you're basically doing G-Max Rapid Flow, which is always good. Good damage output. This card has the odor of something that could be very broken in the future, but just doesn't happen to be broken out of the gate. Up next, we have Monkey Dory with the Adrena Brain ability. That is, why don't they just call it Adrenaline Brain? I don't know, but that's its ability. If this Pokemon has any darkness energy attached, you may use this ability. Once during your turn, move up to 3 damage counters from one of your Pokemon to one of your opponent's Pokemon. So this is something that Gardevoir has been using a little bit in Japan. They're kind of just piling damage counters on their Pokemon and then kind of moving them off to their opponent to help fix math. And then there's, of course, Mind Bend, which does 60 damage, and your opponent's active Pokemon is now confused. I am not in love with this card, and I'm not sure that Gardevoir even should be running it, but it is a variation of Gardevoir that is seeing success in Japan, so it remains to be seen if we're going to see any success with it here in the rest of the world. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of this card, but, and this is an important but, anytime you're able to adjust math with damage counters like this, especially if you're taking damage counters off of your Pokemon, there is always the potential for this card to be super good. Whatever card it ends up being, it has good potential. So do keep Monkey Dory in mind. Definitely still grab some. They're going to be cheap. They're just a holo rare. So pick some up, have them on hand just in case. And then there's Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon EX, which has also seen a bit of fringe play in Japan, sneaking into some Lugia lists. Cornerstone Stance says prevent all damage done from attacks sent to this Pokemon by your opponent's Pokemon that have an ability. And there's a lot of ability hate in this set, both Frostlass and Ogerpon, although ironically Ogerpon itself has an ability. But it's not bad, right? You're basically walling out ability Pokemon, which is never a bad thing. And then you have Demolish for fighting double colors. It does 140 damage. And the attack is not affected by weakness, resistance, or by any effects on your opponent's active Pokemon. So you're only ever going to be hitting for 140 unless you have some other way to multiply the damage. You can't hit them for weakness with this, which kind of sucks. So that damage output is a little unfortunate, but the walling effect on Cornerstone Stance is worth a consideration. And then speaking of walling people out, you have Iron Thorns EX. Iron Thorns EX has the ability Initialization. As long as this Pokemon is in the active spot, Pokemon with a rule box in play have no abilities except any future Pokemon. Pokemon EX, Pokemon V, etc. have rule boxes. And then for Lightning Double Colors is the attack Volt Cyclone, which does 140 damage, and you move an energy from this Pokemon to one of your bench Pokemon. When we tested this both as a quad deck, which is what's seen the most success in Japan, and as part of a future box style archetype. And I think it worked fairly well in both of them, but its damage output does kind of leave a little bit to be desired. However, the disruptive capabilities of Initialization can be pretty devastating for some decks. If they are dependent on abilities for setup or for draw, that can just kind of end their game right then and there. So be aware of Iron Thorns because it's going to see play. And then our last honorable mention here is Scoop Up Cyclone, which is actually a reprint of the old Scoop Up Cyclone. You just pick up a Pokemon and put everything attached to it in your hand. It's good. Some Dragapult lists have been playing this. Some wall decks in general will play this just because it's so strong. Yeah, it just didn't quite eke its way into the top 10. But Scoop Up Cyclone is absolutely worth having a copy of on hand, just in case the deck you intend to play would benefit from it. And finally, let's jump into the top 10 themselves, starting with Wellspring Mask Ogerpon EX. This card is seeing a decent amount of play in Lugia, and you'll see why here in a moment. For a single colorless energy, you have Sob, which does 20 damage. During your opponent's next turn, the defending Pokemon can't retreat. And then for water double colorless, you have Torrential Pump, which does 100 damage. And he says you may shuffle 3 energy attached to this Pokemon into your deck. If you do, this attack also does 120 damage to one of your opponent's benched Pokemon. Don't apply weakness and resistance for benched Pokemon. So this is a way to get a couple of smaller knockouts against single prizers, for example, and then recover or save off, rather, those energy so that when Wellspring Mask Ogerpon is knocked out, you still have access to those energy cards with Archeops, and you can find them with Archeops and reattach them somewhere else. Really, really good effect for Wellspring Mask, and frankly, I'm a little surprised, but this has turned out to be the best of the Ogerpon in the set, so cool, I guess. It's the one that's seeing the most play and the most success, so maybe that will change over internationally, but at least in Japan, Wellspring Mask has definitely seen the most success. At number 9, we have Kieran. Kieran is a supporter that has 2 effects. You choose one of them. You can either switch your active Pokemon with one of your benched Pokemon, so switch, Or you can do 30 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon EX or Pokemon V. So basically you get a damage boost or you get to switch, which is really, really nice. The flexibility of cards like this always make them super valuable. The question is if your deck can actually allocate the space for one, or if it'd rather just use something like a switch or a switch card. So that is something to be aware of. Kirino has definitely seen some play in Japan, and we've played it in several of our lists as we've been kind of testing Twilight Masquerade, and frankly, it's a good card. It's just a matter of finding the right home for it. At number 8, we have Carmine. Carmine says, if you go first, you may play this card during your first turn. Discard your hand and draw 5 cards. This card is insane, and Ancient Box absolutely loves this, and you can see that it will be played in that deck simply because it gives them another out to draw cards even on their first turn. They need to draw, they want to draw, they can draw on their first turn. That is something that hasn't been possible for a while, not since the rules change at Sun and Moon base set, not Sun and Moon. So, let me get this right. At Sword and Shield base set, when they made it so you could no longer play a supporter going first if you were the first player. So Carmine, frankly, is just utter insanity. The previous supporter you could play going first was Beauty, which lets you draw 2 cards. So this is a huge change in the power level of your allowed to go first supporter. And frankly, it scares me a little bit, but it's a very good card. So if your deck is an extremely aggressive deck and needs to draw, something like Lugia, for example, would really want Carmine turn 1 going first. So you have that extra out to getting your Archeops in the discard pile, even if you're forced to go first. Carmine is absolutely something you would want to play. So do keep that in mind. At number 7, we have Jamming Tower. Jamming Tower is basically Lysander's labs of the past. It just disables all of the tools in play. So if they have a Forest Seal Stone that your opponent has put down preemptively, it makes it so they can no longer use the effect of Forest Seal Stone to use Star Alchemy to get a card from their deck because the tool is shut off. So pretty potent stuff. Jamming Tower is pretty good. Of course, there's a lot of counterplay to Jamming Tower. You could just play a Stadium card of your own. You could play Lost Vacuum. There are ways to get around it. But if you can time Jamming Tower well, it can really be devastating for your opponent. And so Jamming Tower has made number 7 for that reason. And at number 6, everybody's favorite sushi Pokemon, Tatsugiri. The ability is attract customers once during your turn. If this Pokemon is in the active spot, you may look at the top 6 cards of your deck, reveal a supporter card you find there, and put it into your hand. Shuffle the other cards back into your deck. And then, of course, nobody cares, but you can do Surf for 50 damage. This card is super strong and will absolutely see some play. Decks that would have played Mew from Celebrations in the past will immediately consider Tatsugiri. Decks that really need to find specific supporters will consider Tatsugiri. There's basically always a reason you want to include something like this in the deck. If your deck can allocate the space for it, you'll probably play this with 1 or 2 copies of Rescue Board. Just something that allow your deck to find supporters more consistently and on repeat, right? Pokegear is a once per. Every time you're trying to play Pokegear, you're just doing it once and then it's gone. You look at the top 7, but it's a one of, right? It's I play it, it's done now. This, as long as Tatsugiri is still not knocked out, you can keep using it over and over again, and you can use Tatsugiri as a pivot to consistently get more consistency out of your deck. There's no reason for most decks to not consider a Tatsugiri, even if they ultimately choose to go with some other engine. So Tatsugiri will absolutely see play. I know some Dragon Bolt lists, for example, have played Tatsugiri, ours included. We've been testing the one on our channel here, on my channel specifically, and we've loved Tatsugiri. Yeah, it's another option for consistency, and it's a good one to have, especially when you need specific supporters every turn. And at number 5 is our first ace spec, Legacy Energy. Legacy Energy says, as long as this card is attached to a Pokemon, it provides every type of energy, but provides only 1 energy at a time. Once per game, if the Pokemon this card is attached to is knocked out by damage from an attack from your opponent's Pokemon, your opponent takes 1 fewer prize card. So this is similar to an ace spec in the past. It was a tool called Life Do. They basically force your opponent to take 1 less prize card when they knocked your Pokemon out. This effect only works once per game, but it's a rainbow energy whenever. So if you use something like Roseanne's to recover this energy, or Silene to recover this energy, you won't get the bonus effect of getting the prize card reduction, but you'll still have that rainbow energy effect. So Lugia loves this, right? It can use it to make it so you're taking fewer prize cards off of knockouts with something like Lugia V-Star. And it also allows it to be more flexible with what it's playing in the deck. So if it wants to play Iron Hands, for example, it can play Iron Hands and use Legacy Energy to power up the lightning attack cost in that. Same goes for Sob, or not Sob, but Wellspring Mask Ogerpon that has that Sob attack, but its other attack is, of course, what it's trying to power up. So this basically allows Lugia to once again be a very colorful attack cost deck, and this is how it's going to do it. Other decks obviously can play this too. We were testing Legacy Energy in our Dragapult list, and we'll probably move off of that for when Dragapult goes against the world here in a couple weeks. But even still, Legacy Energy is pretty good, and that once per game effect of reducing the prize cards your opponent takes can be absolutely devastating to your opponent and their attempt at winning the game, just because it can throw off their prize map so bad. So yeah, Legacy Energy, super good. At number 4 is Unfair Stamp. Unfair Stamp is an absolutely cracked A-Spec card. It's very similar to Roxanne, basically as an item card. It says you can only play this card if one of your Pokemon was knocked out during your opponent's last turn. Each player shuffles their hand into their deck. Then you draw 5 cards and your opponent draws 2 cards. This is also a bit of added consistency. So if your opponent knocks something of yours out last turn, not only do you disrupt them, but you also drastically increase your chances at recovering because you're getting that extra draw off Unfair Stamp. Unfair Stamp is super, super good, and I would argue that it's prime catcher levels of good for this set. It is absolutely, indisputably the best of the A-Specs in this set. You absolutely need to have a copy on hand because there's a good chance at some point a deck you want to play competitively will be running Unfair Stamp, and probably for very good reason. That said, Roxanne is a lie, so Unfair Stamp can very much be a lie sometimes too. Just be aware of that. At number 3, yes, this is a reprint that's at number 3, but it's pretty warranted given the state of special energy in the TCG at the moment. Enhanced Hammer. Enhanced Hammer is a reprint from Guardians Rising. The card effect is discard a special energy attached to one of your opponent's Pokemon. So if they have that legacy energy attached to one of their Pokemon in Lugia, for example, you can get rid of that energy and make it so they cannot throw off your prize map. And yeah, why would you not want to do that? Additionally, if you're not able to one-shot a Dragapult EX that happens to be running Neo Upper Energy, Enhanced Hammer can make it so that they have to find another way to attack because their Neo Upper Energy is now gone. So Enhanced Hammer absolutely sees play. Dragapult even itself plays 1 copy typically in Japan. It will probably carry that mentality over here. Enhanced Hammer, again, have a copy, have maybe 2 copies in your arsenal so that you are ready for the energy smacking meta. But yeah, this card is super, super strong. It's actually really timely that it's come back to the TCG because now very much feels like an appropriate time to be crushing some energies off of our Pokemon with Enhanced Hammer. Absolutely warrants a 3rd spot. And at number 2, there's an argument for this to be number 1 based on how much play it's seen in Japan, but our number 2 here is Blood Moon Ursaluna EX with Veteran's Technique ability. This Pokemon's Blood Moon attack costs 1 colorless less for each prize card your opponent has taken, and then for 5 colorless energy, Blood Moon does 240 damage. This card sort of kind of works as a deck on its own, but really its big flavor is being able to jump into any deck, kind of like Radiant Charizard does, but because it's a purely colorless attacker, it can kind of just be a huge, bulky menace fairly late in the game, make it difficult for your opponent to take the necessary return KO, but also provide you with a way to take a big KO too. Blood Moon Ursaluna is just very, very powerful in that respect, and it's kind of crazy to think that Radiant Charizard saw a decent amount of play, and this will likely see even more play simply because it is that same very, very efficient, very, very good ability on the Pokemon, while also having a similarly good damage output and significantly higher HP. Blood Moon Ursaluna is just super good. And then finally, at number 1, we have Drakloak with the ability Reconnaissance Raid. Once during your turn, you may look at the top 2 cards of your deck and put one of them into your hand. Put the other card on the bottom of your deck. Now, you're thinking, why is number 1 Drakloak? Well, it's not really Drakloak. Drakloak's ability is, of course, very, very good, but its partner is what makes it so good. And its partner, of course, is its evolution Dragapult EX. Dragapult EX is by far the strongest new archetype out of this set, and there is no question about it. Dragapult EX has Jet Headbutt, which does 70 damage, which is nice if you can't get enough energy out on Dragapult. But its real piece de resistance is Phantom Dive. 200 damage, and you're putting 6 damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon, benched Pokemon in any way you like. Dragapult allows you to set up knockouts just like Dragapult VMAX in the past did. So you're setting up knockouts on your opponent's Pokemon, but unlike Dragapult VMAX, you have access to TM Devolution, which makes it so that you can absolutely ruin your opponent's day by just thrashing their board. You spread a whole bunch of damage and then just devolve and ultimately knock everything out on their side of the field, and it can be delicious. Very, very delicious gameplay. I was able to play Dragapult during our testing quite a bit and have really, really enjoyed the deck. And I absolutely think a lot of players who did not get a chance to play Dragapult VMAX during its heyday will find that they really, really enjoy playing Dragapult EX when it comes out in Twilight Masquerade. If you don't want to play Dragapult EX, you do absolutely need to be able to beat it with whatever you choose to play. But frankly, I will be playing Dragapult EX during Twilight Masquerade, and I will absolutely be playing it in the Eternal format because it's even better in the Eternal format. Anyway, that is all for today's top 10. Hopefully you enjoyed this top 10. What is your favorite card in Twilight Masquerade? If you're a player, what is the card you're most looking forward to see? What is the card you're most looking forward to see, rather? And if you are a collector, what card do you most want to add to your collection in Twilight Masquerade? Let me know in the comments. With that said, that's all for today. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.